Welcome to the Western Gulf Plain chapter of Wild Ones meeting at 1 o'clock Central Time in Pitkin, Louisiana. Heard. It's not moving, Dawn. The slideshow's not moving. I have to do it over there. It won't work. Oh, it does work. Okay. Okay, here are the officers of the Western Gulf Plain chapter listed for here. And then there are other chapters in Louisiana if you wanted to join one, like the one in Baton Rouge and one in Pontchartrain Basin, just north of New Orleans. And the Western Gulf Plain chapter. Oh, there are also other chapters in Dallas, Fort Worth, Birmingham, Memphis, and also in Northwest Arkansas. And we plan to have another meeting November 1st, December 6th, January 3rd, February 7th, and also March 7th, April 4th, May 27th, June 24th, and July 22nd over the next few months. So remember, the native plant thing is mow where you go, grow where you don't go. This is a good example of a eco lawn versus an ego lawn. And a good question is, if we can't eat the lawn, then why are we growing it? And finally, the thing that I like, Nana Nana Nunu, my mowed lawn is smaller than yours. Now, those people in the area, or maybe even outside the area, if you want to hear about a plant of the day just about every day, send me an email to native@camtel.net and I can sign you up, and it goes out as a blind copy. What I really want to talk about today is a PowerPoint that I've done on how to feed the caterpillars and find the butterflies and moths. And before we start, I would just talk about the butterfly or moth life cycle. Starts out as an egg. It starts out as an egg. The egg hatches to produce a caterpillar in both the cases of the butterfly and the moth. Then the caterpillar eats a lot and then produces a resting stage called a chrysalis in the case of butterflies, a cocoon in the case of moths. And then a word that you may not hear very often, the word eat close right here, is the emerging of the butterfly or the moth out of the chrysalis or the cocoon to become the adult. Then, of course, the adult lays the eggs, and that's the life cycle. Some close-ups of eggs. These are butterfly eggs. And caterpillars, these are butterfly caterpillars too. And that was my granddaughter, much younger, looking at some monarch caterpillars several years ago. Then the chrysalis and cocoons, these are both chrysalis, one on the left, the monarch, the one on the right is a Gulf fritillary. And then the adults, I do have a couple of moths in here, but 3 butterflies and 2 adults. The top left, top right are moths. Top left, rosa maple. Top right, the blinded sphinx, or is it small-eyed sphinx? And then the top center butterflies are Gulf cloudless sulfur, which are lots running around Allen Acres right here today. And bottom left is a tiger swallowtail, and the bottom right, of course, is a monarch. Adults are great. Adults attract lots of attention, but caterpillars are critical. In the life cycle, it's kind of like, got to have those before you have the adults. Feed the caterpillars and produce your own adult butterflies and moths. A little bit of difference between moths and butterflies in the antennae. Most of the moth antennae are feather-like. Most of the butterfly ones have what looks like a golf club with a slender filament with an enlarged tip. And when the moth or butterfly lands, the butterfly usually has its wings up. The moth usually has its wings spread out to the side. Of course, the activity time, the moth is at night and most of the butterflies in the daytime. There are exceptions to both of these. And of course, as we've already kind of indicated, when they go into the resting stage of in between the caterpillar and the adult stage, the cocoon for the moth and the chrysalis for the butterfly, two different things. Another difference is that most people think of moths are ugly, destructive, and especially for clothes, and the butterfly is beautiful and the pollinator. But of course, Dr. Doug Tallamy talks about the moth caterpillars being very, very important for bird food. They're also important in some cases pollinators, and most or many of them are beautiful, not all are. And perhaps one of their more important characteristics is that they speed up decomposition of organic matter. Some say without them, particularly the caterpillars, we would have lots of piles of organic matter in the world. The number of host plants for most butterflies are very few. Think of the monarch, just one plant. The milkweed moths usually have many host plants. And that leads to what's here at the bottom, the number of species in moths. There are more than 12,000 in North America, but only 825 butterflies. And here in Louisiana, there are 2,500 reported, maybe more moths, and then only 154 species of butterflies. So go back and think about the above, where just a few plants for the butterflies to choose from, but the moths choose a lot. So we'll go through some of the plants that are important. Oaks, let's start out with them. And as Dr. Tallamy talks about it, oaks are very, very important. Look at the number of butterflies listed here, all the way from banded hair streak all to the white M hair streak. Lots of different kinds of small butterflies. Also notice the eastern tiger swallowtail. And a couple of pictures of the red banded hair streak and the red spotted purple, some of the examples of those that eat oak. But also notice there are 221 moss species that eat oak. So these are very important. Oaks are very important caterpillar food plants. Now, a couple of pictures of oaks, a white oak on the left and a line drawing of the post oak on the right. There's quite a number of species of oaks. Then in the bean family, the sennas, the cassias, the camocrista, all of those with the different names, candelabra, partridge pea, lots of other names. Look at the list of butterflies, mostly yellow, some not, like the gray hair streak, but some of the Durantes, longtail, the funeral dusky wing. Everybody can read this list, quite a number of different kinds, and there are 14 moth species. And here's a cloudless sulfur and a gray hair streak. And here's the partridge pea and the candelabra, the senna alata, which has the large leaves, pretty flowers. Also in the bean family, the desmodium and the bagerlice, the stictites, the plant that gets those little green parts of the fruit all over you this time of the year with various names. And notice the list of butterflies and 5 moth species. And here's a picture, of course, of desmodium. If you don't, pretty soon you'll have these all over your clothes as you go out in the woods and walk around. But remember, it's important to have that plant because it will produce or will feed the caterpillars that will become the adults. Trifolium, the clovers, for us in our area, mostly the early spring plants, but some of those persist a little bit. But notice again, quite a few of the yellows, but a number of different kinds of butterflies on the trifolium and 57 moth species. So some pictures of the clovers, that's Melolotus, Metacargo in the top left, which is also has alfalfa in the genus, but the top right is a more common recognized white clover that we have. And then the bottom left is one of the white clovers, white sweet clover. There's a yellow sweet clover too in the genus Melolotus. The pawpaw, very interesting plant with a couple of species in our area, more species in other areas. Zebra swallowtail and several moth species. The left one, of course, are two zebra swallowtails mating. The right one is a pawpaw sphinx. So these are both obviously pawpaws. So a very important plant. Also, it's an edible. There's some fruits taken off of our tree on the left, the flower in the bottom right, and that's a dwarf pawpaw in the top right. So pawpaw, a very interesting plant. Hackberry, the tree is an important one for butterflies. There's 6 butterflies, 2 pictures here. The hackberry, Tawny Emperor, but also American snout, morning cloak, question mark, eastern comma, and 26 moth species off the hackberry. So if you don't have a hackberry, you need to get one. And as I often say, if you plant it, they will come. So I've done that with several plants, including hackberry on my property. And I have seen an American snout here. Haven't seen the others yet, but then I may have missed them, or they may not have gotten here. There's the hackberry, very famous tree with the bumps all over it. Pretty common in parts of Louisiana. So some people might wonder why you'd want to plant it, but of course, remember butterflies and moths. The passion vine, the passiflora in our area, the 2 natives, the Incarnata and Lutea, that some of the non-natives work too, some of the cultivars work. Guff fritillaria and variegated fritillaria, the big ones, but in some places, Julia heliconian, the zebra heliconian, sometimes called the zebra longwing, which is photographed on the right, and the Guff fritillaria on the left. This has recently become the state butterfly, voted in as the state butterfly of Louisiana, and 1 moth species. Of course, here's some pictures of a picture of Passiflora incarnata on the left, Passiflora lutea, a smaller one on the right, and I think I have some pictures of the fruit. The fruit of Passiflora incarnata on the left, it's edible when it gets nice and yellow in color, and lutea on the right, which is smaller and becomes dark, but not really very edible, so small. Sassafras and the other members of the laurel family produce the Palamedes swallowtail, the eastern tiger swallowtail, spicebush, lots of swallowtails, but also notice 17 moth species, including the regal moth, a really neat one. And of course, there's a picture of the Palamedes swallowtail. The sassafras, that's a picture of what the plant, we have a good bit of that in the area. Also in the same family, the laurel family, we have red bay, which again produces about the same kinds of swallowtails, with this great big moth called the tulip tree beauty, which is, and then there are 5 moths, so 4 other moth species for that. And also in the same family, spicebush, which produces, again, the same basic group of swallowtails, very interesting plant. And so this is one that we did not have on our property, but we added a spicebush, and if you build it, they will come. We now seem to have more spicebush swallowtails than before by having this plant here. So it's really been a nice addition to our property. When you start thinking of giant swallowtails, think the citrus family, where citrus itself, hop wafers, toothache trees, trifoliate orange, and even the herbaceous plant rue. But other butterflies like black swallowtail, eastern tiger swallowtail, monarch, even a monarch, I'm not sure about that, painted lady, spicebush, various other things, and 23 moth species. And of course, here's the toothache tree pictures with this very interesting plant, very interesting history, with people reporting it medicinal, various other, and a lot of other common names too. But the bark on the left there, you can see it, and the leaves will produce the toothache, the deadening, just like the bark will. Carrot family, one of the interesting ones where you can really just rely almost on the whole family, just about any. And there are a number of cultivated ones, parts of Diophenol, but a lot of native species. And I've seen a number of caterpillars on the native cowbane, which is a picture on the right here. And we see that pretty regularly over the last month or so. So, but notice the other couple of other butterflies, Brazilian skipper, painted lady, and then 20 moth species. Most of these will have some moths, some butterflies. There are a couple, well, I think 3 or 4 that I found that have one or the other, but not both. And here is a tree called the ash, the fraxinus. a couple of, well, what, 3 butterflies, but 61 moth species. And one of those is a rustic sphinx, one of the larger, interesting sphinx moths that we see at night. So green ash, several other ash. So adding trees, you realize the variety, the more variety of plants you have, the more variety of butterflies and moths you have. The nightshade family, some of those, or many of those, are herbaceous, like tobacco, pepper, tomato, datura, things like that, and produce butterflies like the cabbage white and the hair streak. And if you've been noticing, the gray hair streak is popping up a lot. It's more like a moth. It has a lot of choices of plants for its food: painted lady, western pygmy blue, whirlabout, and 57. And so here's a picture of the whirlabout, a real small butterfly, but on the right was one of my favorite moths that I photographed here. It's a Florida fern moth, but it's also reported to eat members of the nightshade family. And here's some pictures of the nightshade family. The tobacco, the native, well, not a native, well, maybe it is, not sure. But anyway, it opens, the flowers open at night, and then the datura, the devil's trumpets. Thistle is an important one that not only does it provide the caterpillar, but it also one of those that dual purpose. It would be a nectar feeder, not only for butterflies, but for bees and for even for hummingbirds. But here's a list of some of the, a list of the butterflies of American lady, eastern tiger, little metalmark, painted lady, pearl crescent, red admiral, and 5 moth species. And here's the American lady. And here's the painted lady, which eats also rabbit tobacco, cudweed, everlasting, kind of a group of the sunflower family. And notice again, 3 moth species. Of course, the famous butterfly of all, the monarch, with also the queen and those people that get into South Texas, the soldier, and also look at that gray hair streak coming through, and 7 moth species. So interesting. And here are a couple of milkweeds, the native butterfly milkweed, tuberosa, and viridis, the green milkweed on the right, both natives. And we do monarch tagging here at our house, and it's an important national thing. And so we buy the tags every year, waiting on the monarchs to arrive. We haven't gotten any yet or here in our area, but we hope to be tagging a number of those over the next few weeks. And the willow tree, which is very important for a number of butterflies, but also 129 moth species. And the butterflies are things like the red admiral, the eastern tiger, the striped hair streak viceroy. And here's a viceroy and also a red admiral here on the right. And I wanted to show you a corkscrew willow, which has a viceroy caterpillar on it. Because sometimes people don't have room for a great big willow tree, but they may have room for this small shrub, which you call a corkscrew willow. And I wanted to show you the difference between a viceroy and a monarch. The monarch has doesn't have that extra black line that runs across the wing. Like if you look carefully at the viceroy on the left, there's a little black line running across those wings that the monarch does not have. I also found that viceroys are smaller and darker generally than monarchs. And the cherry, the plum, peach, pear, members of the rose family, quite a number of butterflies, but 158 moth species. And here's the eastern tiger swallowtail and the banded hair streak. So again, what we're emphasizing in this talk is the caterpillars, not so much the nectar plants. That could be another thing altogether, but the caterpillars so that you can get the adults. Malvaceae, the cotton family, hibiscus, ochra, sada, American lady, and a number of others, in particular the checkered skippers, the tropical, and the white checkered, number of smaller butterflies here, and 67 moth species. And the checkered skipper down here in the bottom, and a hieroglyphic moth that have eaten the members of the what you might want to call it the hibiscus family, the mallow family. So number of plants around. And here's some of the plant. Here's a hibiscus on the left, and the cider with I knew it for years as ironweed. It was so hard to pull up, but I think recent common names have migrated toward Cuban jute for that. But I still think of it as ironweed because of its such tough character for pulling out of the ground. I know there's another ironweed out there. Grasses and sedges are very important for butterflies, probably one of the most, the highest number, because there's so many skippers that eat only grasses and sedges. And here's a fiery skipper and a gem satyr, funny looking one that I found one night on my sheet for a butterfly that eats the grasses and sedges. And notice too, there are 116 moth species, and some of the plants that some of the grasses you might want to plant that would be kind of attractive as an ornamental and natives. And part of the system that we did a few weeks ago on the prairie would be big blue stem and switchgrass. And then eastern pine, elfin, and gray hairstreak are members of the pine family. We, in this part of the state of Louisiana, have lots of pine trees. And so there are a couple of butterflies, but 82 moth species, including this Echelon sphinx, which is one of my favorites, and this painted lichen moth. And here, of course, is the pine. But further north, people would have these other trees. We'd have to drive a ways to see a larch or spruce or a hemlock, but they are important butterfly and moth host plants. But ours are almost all pines with loblolly and longleaf, a couple of pine pictures of pines that are out here. Very interesting, smaller, medium-sized butterfly is the buckeye, and it eats the agalanus this time of the year, and it eats a plantain in the spring of the year. But the plant on the right is purple false foxglove, one of its big hosts in the fall, but only one moth species. But here's plantain, and so buckeye in the spring of the year eat that, but also the variegated fritillary. And here's one of the moths, a joyful verbia, beautiful one that pops up and on the lights at night. But the caterpillars would eat plantain. And there's a plantain. The one on the left is a native, the one on the right is a non-native, but very widespread, the major, the big one, the giant one. And the one on the right is a very important edible medicinal plant. Goatweed, interesting plant, also called doveweed, and woolly croton produces a goatweed leafwing and gray hairstreak, red banded, and only 3 moth species. But the color on the goatweed is very interesting. If you look from the side, it's kind of a dull gray. If you look from the back, look at that bright red color there. And here's a goatweed plant, lots of it around the area. Notice the caterpillar and the rolled up leaf on the right. So lots of those, and easily overlooked. The aster, a big genus, recently moved to the genus Symphyotrichum, pearl crescent, Texas crescent, American lady, and 21 moths. And there's a pearl crescent and an Isabella tiger moth. And of course, there's the picture of asters. They come in many shapes and colors and lots of species, very difficult to get the species. Now, a few years ago, we heard about a butterfly called the Phaon crescent. It eats frog fruit. So we went out and got frog fruit, and now we have Phaon crescents on Allen Acres. And so, and again, if you build it, they will come. In addition, the white peacock and 3 moth species. I find too that those little small flowers on the frog fruit is a good nectar source for small butterflies. Sweet gum, one of the most common non-pine trees in the state of Louisiana, and produces a couple of butterflies, king's hairstreak, striped hairstreak, but 30 moth species, including one of these red bordered, red edge ones called the Nemeria moth. And they're called the emeralds and very popular. Goldenrods are good for nectar and not for producing allergies. I mean, well, producing hay fever, in spite of the people are allergic to them, but most people would say you never breathe in that much pollen. You would have to be right up on top of the flower to get that much. And so most of the time you're not going to get goldenrod allergies from the pollen in the air. But there are a couple of gall moths on the goldenrod, very interesting. And then there are 27 moth species out there. But I think this one may be more important for nectar than it is for, see, the brick yellow flowers. And I've seen lots of butterfly use of nectar for these throughout in the fall of the year. American beech, I always say this should be American tree. If we ever selected a tree for America, it might be American beech. 1 butterfly, juveniles, dusky wing, but 61 moth species, including the Promethemia silk moth that you see here. Very interesting tree. Maples are important for a few butterflies, but 98 moth species. There's a morning cloak butterfly, and then the more famous of the moth ones, a rosy maple moth. And here's some maples. Most of the common maples in our area are the red maples, like you see on the right. The one on the left is the Florida sugar maple, which is not that common, but you can buy it and plant it. But the red maple is probably pretty much in most of our areas, in most of the forests. And then the alder tree, alnus, which produces a couple of butterflies, but 56 moths, and including the imperial moth, one of the bigger moths that we have. And there's the alder, alnus, which is important. So hopefully you're realizing that some of these trees are already in your neighborhood. It's just a matter of keeping them instead of replacing them with crepe myrtle or something non-native. Birches, betula, a number of butterflies from eastern comma to striped hair-streak, red-spotted purple, and 113 moths, including this great big one, the Polyphemus, which looks as big as a bat when you find it at night. So birch trees are probably planted a good bit because people may be not thinking that they're helping out nature by planting a birch tree. They're planting it for their own beauty, enjoyment of beauty, but in doing so, maybe they're accidentally. But so keep in mind that it does produce feed butterfly caterpillars and feed moth caterpillars. And there's a birch with the interesting bark. The mustard family, another one that you kind of like easy to grow because you can buy the seeds and grow it. But we have to remember in our area, it's a cool season. Well, every year is a cool season, but we really don't get much growth of the mustard family after May or June here because it gets too hot. But you can mustard, cabbage, things like that these cabbage white and the other butterflies listed, and 26 moth species. So here's a great southern white, and the moth, the great leopard or the giant leopard too. So again, just about most of these plants produce both or feed both butterfly and caterpillar, butterfly and moth caterpillars. And here, of course, are the members of the mustard family that you might recognize, the cabbage and the cauliflower, lots of other things that you might be growing in your garden that might be accidentally feeding the caterpillars of butterflies. The ironwood or carpinus, which is a common tree that we have, feeds a couple of butterflies, eastern tiger swallowtail and striped hairstreak, but 33 moth species, including this walnut sphinx. And there's a picture of the carpinus, smooth bark and leaves. And then the hickory trees, including our pecan, feeds 93 moth species, but also the gray hairstreak, the banded hairstreak, the eastern tiger swallowtail. And the notable moth is the Io, a very outstanding one that you see a picture of here, the Io moth. And of course, there's some pictures of hickory leaves. They turn a brilliant yellow in the fall, and the pecan fruits on the right. Castanea, chinkapin, chestnut, most in our areas. Originally, we may have had the chinkapin, and chestnuts may have come to North Louisiana. But of course, then we have the 3 butterflies listed and 58 moth species. White dotted prominent and the skiff moth are a couple. It's kind of interesting. Back in July, I went on a bug guide gathering in New Mexico, and the first moth that I saw was this white dotted prominent. I felt so, wow, I can recognize it. But after that, it went downhill. There were a lot of other moths that I didn't recognize. And there's a picture of the chinkapin. So a miniature chestnut, if you haven't seen it, but it's been a long time. The same blight that wiped out the chestnut affects the chinkapin. It just doesn't kill it completely, knocks it back, and all it is a shrub instead of a tree like it used to be. And so it doesn't make a lot of fruits anymore. The catalpa tree, catawba tree, different pronunciations. The eastern tiger swallowtail, an 8 moth species, which is, of course, one that is named for the catawba sphinx, but also a pretty one called the tersa sphinx. So I, myself, and other people have gone fishing with catawba worms before. If we had not used that worm for fishing and let it live, it may have turned into this moth that you see on the left, the catawba sphinx. And there's a picture of the catawba in flower with its interesting large leaves. And the dogwoods, a couple of butterflies, but also 41 moth species, including this pretty one with the green color on the left, and one with the name dogwood bora on the right, with the interesting wing shape and so forth. So remember, we're emphasizing growing plants that produce caterpillars. And there, of course, is the dogwood. And this one's kind of attractive, but I don't see much in the way of pollination visit for nectar on the flowers. But remember that the leaves are important for the caterpillars. Now, here's our first one, the pipevine, that has no moths, just butterflies. And pipevine swallowtail and polydamas swallowtail on the pipevines, the genus Aristolochia. There's a Fimbriata, the fringe pipevine, or now called the white-veined pipevine, and the common Dutchman's pipe, a woody shrub. That first one is a herbaceous. This one's woody, and this is growing in my yard, but I've grown it from a wild population, and you can see a pipevine swallowtail caterpillar on the right. I understand that there are some right now, as I speak, outside chewing on my leaves isn't that great? They're eating up the leaves of my pipevine swallowtail plant. Witch hazel, the other way, no butterflies, just moths. And here are 27 moth species, including this figure 7 moth that eats witch hazel, and one other that where it's only the moths are the grapes, the muscadines, and there are 45 moth species, including this white-lined sphinx. And there is a picture of the famous, in our area of the country, the muscadine, but just about any grape would do the same. Virginia creeper, often mistaken for poison ivy, but notice the 5 leaflets, 29 moth species, no butterflies, including, of course, the Virginia creeper sphinx. That would be a great test question, right? For that. And some of the bird people tell me that the Virginia creeper seeds are really good for feeding birds. So just as kind of a summary, the number of butterfly caterpillar host species per plant family in the grasses, there are 48 of the species remember, there are only 154 in Louisiana, so 48 would be in the grasses, 38 in the bean family, 15 in the sunflower family, 13 as you go on down the list of the numbers of important families of plants for feeding the butterflies. And then when you look over at a summary of the moth caterpillars, you would see that for the big one is the rose family, but notice how much more it is, 926, because remember, there are 2,500 potential moth species in our area versus 154 butterflies. That's the reason this number is so much larger than this one, 48 here, 926 here. Then notice the beech tree, the bean family, the sunflower family, and so forth on down the list. Right now we have butterfly blast going on here at Allen Acres, so you can see a number of the butterflies that we talked about, a number of the plants. And there's a book out on that host plants, and we'll try to take any questions. These are some South Texas butterflies, and this is my wife Susan being too serious in South Texas. No, need Dawn. Well, we didn't get anybody. I guess you just got to train off, huh?
You paused it.
I don't know. Wow, that's terrible.
Mm.
Can we stop?